This year I'm working on a nature journaling project documenting the 72 micro-seasons of East Devon in the UK. This involves me doing a journal page like a painting every 5 to 6 days. I'm a little bit behind, but I have been out gathering information and getting down a list of all of the things that I'm going to be covering. And then back in the studio, I'm working my way through the year trying to catch up on my project. Over the last few months, collage has been a major focus of my nature journaling, and you would have seen that in my last video on the Micro Seasons project. In that video I showed you 2 different collage methods that I used for using tissue paper in my nature journal, and following on from the theme of collage, I decided that I wanted to go a little bit further with this, both in using natural materials and kind of furthering the idea of painting. So I'm just going to show you through these little methods now. To find the subject for this next experiment in collage, we need to go back to early spring, in March, when the hawthorn was just coming out in the hedgerows. I painted a background in Derwent Inktense ready to go, and then on a separate sheet of A4 Cardi paper, 320 GSM, I painted the hawthorn sprigs just coming into leaf. Each of these were cut out, and then I took these little slips of paper, inspired by the kinds of little bits of paper used in children's pop-up books to make the illustrations pop forward, and stuck them down in the right place so I could line up my cut-out painting over the top. I glued these down into place, and then put a little bit of extra glue over the top to stick down my paintings. You can see it's worked really well to make these stand forward from the background. I think this came out really well. I'm really happy with how this first layer of painting pops out from the background. I was very much inspired by those kids' pop-up books, and I think it's worked really well here to kind of make this stand forward. So I'm going to carry on with this technique in the next one and just kind of work a little bit on furthering this even more. It's spring in the undercliffs, and on the chalk meadows these super soft mullein leaves are just emerging. I always think they feel just like velvet, and so I wanted to recreate them. How do you recreate something that feels like velvet? Well, by using velvet, of course. First off, I painted the background once again quickly in Derwent Inktense. When the background was mostly ready, I moved to my sheet of velvet. I chose some very thick craft velvet for this, which is felt backed in this lovely white felt which was easy to draw on in my mechanical pencil. I used these fabric shears and my typical scissors I use for cutting out anything to cut out all the shapes I'd drawn from my reference image of the mullein plant. Then it was a question of how to stick it together. I thought glue would ruin the lovely soft crushed velvet here, so I had to go in with a needle and thread, and that is really not my strong point. I found that this was very, very thick, just as I'd intended, and that made the needle difficult to get through. My dad was telling me that I needed a thimble on my thumb to make this work, but I was quite happy to just use the table and push that needle through. The main thing that I was concerned with was making all of these little leaves arrange in as close as possible a design to the original photograph. I really wanted this to look like a real young plant. So slowly and surely, I worked my way, stitching this entire plant together, bit by bit. It was one of the most unusual projects that I've done so far. And the final plant is actually quite bulky. It's really going to affect closing these pages on my journal. But I'm not too worried about that really, because there's an awful lot of things that are popping forward and collagey in this journal. I'm just going to have to be happy with the fact that this journal probably won't close fully at the end of the project. Once it was done, it was all about how to lay the little plant on the page. I wanted to continue the painting underneath to make sure that there's some shadows, and to put foliage in to make the plant really look like it's in its natural environment. I'm going to have to wait till the end of the project to stick this plant down, so for now I'm just going to store it somewhere safe in the studio to wait until the rest of the journal's paintings are finished. One of the main reasons I've managed to get myself quite so far behind is I've been really busy with other projects over the last few months. First of all, my books came out. They were published just a few weeks ago from the time of recording, and I've been busy doing kind of launch events and doing a bit of signing and a few bits and bobs online that needed doing to sort of propel those into the world as best I can. And also I've been doing a lot of teaching. I've been teaching my 2 nature journaling retreats, and everybody contributed beautifully to these. There's a little bit of the work going across the screen right now, so you can kind of see what people are up to. And they will be running next year. And so if you're interested in those, make sure you're signed up to my mailing list so that you can keep on top of when those dates are going to be available to book. I also contributed to the Global Geo Art Blitz, and I was actually in this very location looking at these really interesting brambles here, and all of the life that I found on this bush over the course of a single day. So all of that is now kind of available on iNaturalist to have a little look at. You can go to the Global Geo Art Blitz 2025 group and see all of the work that was done as a part of that. You can also find that on #GeoArtBlitz2025 on Instagram. And if you'd like to join in next year, again, keep an eye out. It's going to be towards the end of July, and it's a wonderful way to contribute to a global nature journaling project. These are the pages that I did for my Geo Art Blitz journal, and you can see that I've stuck them in to my main outdoor nature journal. I'm kind of looking to include a little bit more of this sort of, I guess, kind of mixed media nature journal pages outside. I've kind of, for a long time, I've mainly focused on just doing pencil work like this on my outdoor nature journaling, but I'm kind of getting more and more into the idea of taking this little limited palette of different artists' materials outside with me and making these kind of quick pages of interesting things that I see while I'm out and about, and that's something I'm going to develop for next year. By the way, this, if you like this particular method that I'm showing here of nature journaling, I have a class for this up on the Nature Journaling Circle for August 2025, so you can kind of come on and come on live and have that class with me, or you can watch the recording later on. So if you kind of like this specific way of working, I'll be showing how to do that and all of the materials that I'm using over on the Nature Journaling Circle. The inspiration for the final collage page I'm going to show you today is the goat willow fluff that back in May was creating snowdrifts over the paths and pavements. We have so many goat willows around here in the river valley, and they just create so much of this. Best way that I could think of to actually recreate this was to just use the material itself. So I gathered bagfuls of it and brought them back to the studio to store. Developing from the pop-up idea of the hawthorn, I decided to paint on a separate sheet of cardie paper once again. This time I was using different greens to kind of get this wonderful stripy effect with lots of dry brush techniques. I then drew lots of different leaves on there. I was thinking of the way that the leaves were poking through the goat willow drifts when I was gathering the goat willow fluff. Sometimes I was using a fine liner to do lines on the outside, particularly for things like the stalks of grass, mainly so I knew where to cut when I got my fabric shears out once again. I did another little background in the journal. This was kind of just really quick and rough, because I knew that it was mostly going to be covered by the goat willow. Next I cut out all of the shapes. I didn't have my favourite scissors with me this day. Sometimes I added a bit more paint to the leaves, and once again I'm using this pop-up technique, so I've got these little bits of paper that I've stuck to the back of some of the leaves. This is even more important this time, because I want the goat willow to be able to be pushed behind the leaves and for the leaves to emerge through it. It was also important to work out what angle I wanted each little painting to come out at. I didn't tend to use the pop-up things for the grass, I just stuck them at the very bottom. I knew that by anchoring them from one end, because they're long and thin, the top end would just naturally ping forward, so it made sense to only attach them at one point, and not worry about trying to control that too much. Once all the plants were in, I got out my goat willow fluff, which had held its form quite wonderfully from several months ago. I coated the pages with EVA glue and did it in sections, really just pulling the goat willow out in clumps and just sticking it down on the bottom edge. And not all of it is actually stuck down, but it does actually cling to itself pretty well. I know I'm going to lose some of it over time, but it really doesn't matter very much. The main thing with this page is how it feels when you touch it. There was something almost comedic about this process of sticking seeds down onto the page. I kept finding myself laughing a little bit at the absurdity of what I was doing. But the final page is just so lovely to touch and to look at, and I'm really happy with the result. The main issue with this method is that you can probably see it even here and now. Little bits of this will kind of float off and disappear over time. If I tried to stick it down, then I would have it would have just become kind of very uniform and flat, and I wanted to keep that beautiful soft texture. It's a wonderful kind of tactile, beautiful thing to kind of feel. I think sometimes these things are not just about looking at them, especially with this book, it's about kind of how you interact with each of these pages. And one of the ways you can interact is to actually, just feel it and get a feel for and a sense of the actual material itself and how it behaved when it was in its environment. Maybe next year I'll come back and top this page up if too much of it gets up and flies away. I really hope you've enjoyed seeing how this nature journal has been progressing through the year, and I'm going to be kind of speeding up on my progress over the next few months because I haven't got quite so much teaching. I'm going to be able to get stuck into catching up. So make sure you're subscribed to see the continuation of this project, and I've got some really great ideas for next year. So there's a whole lot coming up. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.